Hey guys, it's Fusion here. I just wanted to do my pick'ems for the IEM Rio 2022 major that is happening in I think it's just under or actually I'm sorry, not under, almost in about a week. Just wanted to do my challenger stage pick'ems. And so yeah, I'll kind of go through what teams I think are going to be. I think the order I'm going to do this in is I think I'm going to start with my 0 and 3. Then I'm going to move on to the 7 teams that I think are going to advance, and then I'll put the 3-0 team in the as my last selection. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because for those who don't know, for those who don't understand the strategy that typically comes into doing these pick'ems for the different stages, you typically want to select your 3-0 as a team that is probably going to have an easy first round matchup, and you think could be a sleeper pick to join um, to be a part of the top 8 that move on into the next stage. You don't want it to be a team like the obvious choice would be like a Vitality or like a Cloud9, right? Those would be the obvious picks in the sense that you think that they are the best teams out of the out of everybody else in the group, and that you think they're probably, they are the best team, so they should go 3-0. But that's not the best strategy to take with this because it means that you are, they have a high likelihood of also going 3-1, right? They could lose a best of one and then just win out from the rest, and now you've just lost. You take a team that is pretty much guaranteed to make it through, and you're just guaranteeing that you're not going to get the points for it, essentially. So the typical strategy is to get all the teams that you think are locks to make it through. You try to get all of those teams in the top in the remaining 7 teams that will advance section, and then you kind of take a flyer on the 3-0. Also, depending upon, sometimes it's smart to look at like your first round matchup, right? You might think 0-0 Nation is like a sleeper pick, right? Um, but it all just depends on, you know who are they going to play against first at the major, right? So for 0-0 Nation, for example, they are going to be playing Bad News Eagles. There's a very good chance that 0-0 Nation loses to Bad News Eagles, and so maybe that's not a game that you want to take a flyer on in a best of one, right? Whereas maybe a team like OG, well, not really OG, because OG's probably going to go through. Well, you'll see. You'll see with my pick what I think is going to happen. Maybe you think Gamer Legion is a team that's going to cause some upsets and could potentially surprise people and go 3-0. That people aren't taking too seriously, and they play 9Z first, and you think that they're probably better than 9Z. They're probably going to win. I would caution against that just because 9Z actually looked pretty good at the Americas qualifier, but who knows? Maybe 9Z doesn't show that level of now that the pressure's on, maybe they don't show the same level of form. Who knows? But you understand what I'm kind of trying to drive at here. So let's just first start with my 0-3 pick. So my 0-3 pick is going to be IHC. IHC is the Asian region major. Like they got the Asia slot. They didn't have very much competition in the sense that there's only 4 teams in the qualifier, and so there aren't really many opponents that you have to play against. And IHC was at the last major as well, and they didn't do very well. I think they might have actually also gone out 0-3 in that major, if I recall correctly. But yeah, IHC. Unfortunately, this is too much to ask. This is a little too much to ask, obviously. And I think really, guys, the only options that you can put for 0-3 is probably IHC and Greyhound. I think those are the 2 teams that are by far and away the weakest teams in this entire stage. And if you look at who Greyhound is playing, who are they playing? They're playing OG, so that's also probably a safe bet. You could probably take Greyhound there and expect to also see them go 0-3. It's going to be between those 2 teams most likely in the first elimination match to see who is going to go 0-3. So it really, honestly, a good way to think about it too could be in a matchup between IHC versus Greyhound Gaming, which team do you think is going to win. And I would personally favor Greyhound. So I think IHC is probably going to be the worst team at this event, and they're probably going to go 0-3. So now that I've talked about my 0-3, let's move on into the teams that I think are locks. And just to kind of give a little bit more structure to this, these first couple picks that are going to be in this top like five, the top five, I think, in these like 7 teams that will advance section, I think are pretty clear. But once you get to like, I would say I guess the top 4 to 5 are pretty clear. Once you get to like the bottom 2 to 3, it's kind of where you're taking a little bit of a gamble. You're kind of just saying, well, I think this is the best team going into it right now, or maybe you think there's a team that can upset and make it through, but you don't think their run is easy enough to be, or their first round matchup is good enough to be a 3-0 pick, but you still think they're good enough to slide in at the end. So let's get through the obvious ones. Vitality is obviously going to make it through. Cloud9 is going to make it through. Who else do we have? Outsiders is going to make it through. Furia probably going to make it through. And I think the only other one that I can see out of this list is probably Fnatic. But even then, this is where you start to get into some iffy discussions. I think Furia is pretty much a lock. I don't think there's any teams here that are really, besides the other teams that are already in my top, that are already in my 7 in this group. I think are probably. I think it's pretty safe to say Furia is going to make it through. They're one of the better teams, definitely at this stage. Fnatic, I think, is just they're an interesting team. Honestly, I think they show a lot of like confidence in their playstyle. And I think they should be fine at this stage. I think knowing the opponents, I think worst case scenario for them, they have to have a best of 3 at the end. And I think they make it through that, to be honest. So I'm not super concerned about these teams. Now, OG is the next one here. And I'm not as high on OG as maybe other people might be, and that's just because I've seen some serious inconsistency with this team. They had a good showing at Blast, but post Blast, it's been pretty spotty. Um, they had that really, really bad loss in Australia. I think they looked good. Didn't they do pretty well? I mean, this is the first time they've actually been. I don't know that they've had stickers ever, or maybe at least in a very long time. I know with the Alexi B lineup, they never had. I don't think they ever had stickers. I'm trying to look right now to see if I can pull up the major. Were they in Group B? They were. They were the fourth. They made it fourth out of their. They went 3-1. So that's pretty good. But again, I mean, I just think like I'm a little worried about their consistency as a team, but I think they're good enough, to make it through. I think they're still a good enough team to make it through the stage. But this is a team that I like probably wouldn't bet on to make it past past the legend stage, for example. But I still think they're good enough to make it through the stage. The last team is a real big toss-up because you have a lot of teams here that could get this last spot. I think you're looking at like teams like a Mouse, a Big, potentially. I think a Gamer Legion. They looked, you know, somewhat decent. I think, during they showed some promise, but there's a lot of like sleeper teams here, man. Like 9Z's no joke. There's a chance they slide through at the end. I don't know though. I still don't know that I would take a flyer on them. I think some people are going to go for the fact that it's a major in Brazil and the fact that they have a lot of veterans on their team and pick maybe Imperial, or they're just going to do straight Hopium and pick Imperial or Zero Zero Nation. I think at a Zero Zero Nation and Imperial, I think you would. I think Zero Zero Nation is a better team, but I think there's definitely an argument you can make in terms of when it gets to a high pressure environment that Imperial just has more veteran players that have. Yeah, I mean, at last major it showed. I don't think Imperial should have made it even close to as far as they got. They shouldn't have even made the major last major. But they did, and they made a deeper run than anyone expected. It was mostly due to just their grit as a team with veteran experience. So I think some people are going to put Imperial in this slot. I think I'm going to take a safe option, or I don't want to say a safe option. I don't feel like there's really any safe options into this last spot, but I think I'm going to go with Big. I think Big is the fundamentally just a better team than the rest of these teams for this last slot. I think that even though they have to have a replacement, I can't remember for who it is specifically. The name is slipping my mind, but I know they're playing Sin as a replacement, and Sin's a really good player. They seem to be gelling well. I don't know. I think Big is definitely like they're always the sleeper pick. They're always a pick that you just like they're gonna get a best of one or a best of three against a good team, and they're gonna get that win. They're gonna do those types of things, and I think Big fundamentally as a team is good enough to make it through the stage. So I'm gonna go with Big as my last option. So it leaves a big question in terms of what is my 3-0 team? What is the team that I think is gonna go 3-0? And uh, this actually was kind of a tough decision for me because I think there's a lot of teams that can do this, right? Now, really the best place to start is screw it, look at the matchups, right? Because even if you think a team has upset potential and could go 3-0 as like a sleeper pick, um, if they don't have an easy run, if they don't have a good first round matchup, I should say, not an easy run, because you can't know their run even off of one matchup. But if you look at the first round matchup and it's not favorable for them, then it's not good to pick them as a 3-0, right? So just looking at the challenger stage, looking at these matches, right? What are some of the teams that you think could be a surprise 3-0? Mouse is probably one of them, but they're playing outsiders. Bad News Eagles 0-0 Nation. That's not a bad shout for Bad News Eagles, I would say, but it's still risky, right? I think it's still risky. Um, you don't really see Bad News Eagles play too often, so it's kind of hard to tell, you know, how good they are, especially it's just, and you don't even know how good 0-0 Nation is going to be on the day. So it's a hard one to really choose. There's no definitive answer. Um, I think I would still favor Bad News Eagles, but it's not it's closer than you might think. Um, what are some of the other ones that you think could go 3-0 here? Um, I mean, Imperial's playing Vitality. Fnatic's probably a lock, but there's just not. Gamer Legion's playing 9Z, which I think you should favor Gamer Legion, but there's definitely, I don't know, that 9Z team, man. Like if you watch the Americas qualifier, like that 9Z team was pretty damn strong. So they were surprisingly good. So if they show the form that they showed there, I think there's a chance they take a game against one of these teams. Um, and I don't know that I fully favor Gamer Legion over 9Z. I think the clear cut obvious selection, guys, and this looks like hopium, but I swear to God, is Evil Geniuses. I think Evil Geniuses is the 3-0 selection. I think they're the flyer that you should take. I think this is the team that coming into this major, people were starting to finally have some hope for EG to some degree going into Blast, the Showdown qualifier, and they kind of just ripped it all away by losing to Fluxo. But I would like to remind people that it was an online best of. It was a best of three to be fair, and I think EG should have won it 2-0. They should have won the Dust 2 game. They made a lot of mistakes. They basically, EG, what happened at the Showdown, and I know this because I watch every Evil Geniuses game. If anyone watches any of my podcasts, I talk about Evil Geniuses a lot, especially the Counter Strike team. So I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this team. And it looked like against Fluxo, they were making too many mistakes when they definitely should have been winning the rounds, right? They were just throwing away rounds that they definitely 100% of the time should be winning. And it happened so many times on Dust 2, and they barely lost that map. It happened again on um, I know they played Nuke in the third map, but my mind is Mirage. Mirage was fine, but I think on Nuke they definitely had rounds that they should have won that they didn't win. They had rounds where they were spamming people through smokes on Nuke. They'd get into a 5v3 and they'd lose the round somehow while they were on CT side. Like just things that should never be happening. So I think EG is a team that I think a lot of people don't really respect, don't really think are that good. But I would remind people that besides the showdown, they have been constantly improving in every single tournament they've been in. The first event they went to was the Blast groups where they had a stand in with Rush that people just like to forget. And in the first part of the group stage, they said that they tried to practice with Rush. It obviously didn't work out well. Rush is not automatic, and so it didn't work out very well at the beginning of the group stage. And then they kind of put automatic in, but they still didn't have much practice with automatic, and so they ended up having like a kind of close series against Big, but it just or was it against Big? I can't remember. It might have been against somebody else, or it was against NIP. It was against NIP, and they won the second map pretty dominantly on overpass, I think. And then they ended up losing the series. But overall, it was a good first showing for the team, especially considering their circumstances, right? And then the next thing they went to was to qualify for the qualifier for the major, to qualify for the Americas qualifier, and they had a very shaky game against Limitless where they almost lost, but for the rest of the run, it looked pretty damn convincing. They had a close game against Team 1 as well, but if you actually watch that game, that was a game that EG had the control pretty much the entire game until it started slipping away from them at the end, where EG was basically up like some ridiculous scoreline, like 15-5 or something, and they just kind of like started losing rounds that they should have won. And eventually they closed it out, and then they played ATK in the final, and they dominated them on Mirage. Look, they did well there. But then the big test, right, was going to EPL, right? That was the big test. How are they going to play at EPL? Is this a team that is actually going to improve? Now they're playing against this is their real debut, in my opinion, right? Blast doesn't really count. This is their real debut. Now they've had reps under their belt, right? They played against in their group at EPL, and you know what? They got battered by Liquid, but they showed decent results against Furia. They got also battered by Cloud9, but they looked pretty decent against Furia. They almost beat Furia in the best of three that they played. And then they beat Eternal Fire and they beat Movie Star Riders and they barely missed out on third place. So that was improvement. Then they go to the Americas RMR, the Americas qualifier, major qualifier. They play really, really well. They almost beat Liquid in a best of three to go to the Legend stage. In fact, in many ways, Evil Geniuses probably should have won, but they didn't. And so I've seen this team constantly improve every single tournament. I think this is the sleeper pick. Especially when you look at their first round matchup. They're playing IHC, which is the team that I have going 0-3. So I just think this is the game where I think EG is just they're just the much better team than IHC, and they in no way should they lose this best of one. Now, with me saying all of this, somehow they're going to lose this best of one, and I'm going to look like an idiot. But I do think when you look at everything from a what should happen standpoint, and you judge the strength of all these teams, I think EG is actually a pretty good bet to take as a 3-0 because they are a sleeper team, and nobody really knows what to expect from them, and they don't rate them or respect them yet entirely. And I think EG can make surprise some teams. So as the EG fan, it looks really fucked up that I'm putting EG as the 3-0. It looks like some mad hopium. I promise to you there is logic to this. I do think that, like I said, I think you need to put a sleeper pick strategically. You have to put your sleeper pick in the 3-0 spot, and looking at first round matchups is a great way to do that. Evil Geniuses got super lucky that for some stupid reason they're put as like the number 2 seed, and so they get IHC as their first game. So like that's just the way it crumbles, and I think they're going to be the team to potentially go 3-0 that nobody expects. So we'll see how it goes. But overall, really what I care about the most is these 7 teams, right? These are where you're going to get your points. The 3-0 and the 0-3 are nice gambles to get. Even though the 0-3 is usually more of a lock, but these 7 teams, these are the point. This is where you want to get your points. You want to get your points right here. So these are really the teams that I'm wanting to pay attention to make sure that they make it through. And then this would be a nice bonus. This is probably the least likely, obviously, to happen out of all of these. And then the IHC 0-3, it's pretty much just between them and Greyhound, most likely, to see who's going to go 0-3. So yeah, with all that being said, I'm just going to update my picks, lock that in, and yeah, thank you guys for watching. And once the challenger stage is over in 2 weeks, I think it's like 2 weeks. I will make my next video for the legend stage. So hopefully we'll see what we do. But this is what I've got. So.